Morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Just give me 1 second because of the lighting here. Okay. Again, I apologize for the delay. A little bit of technical difficulties this morning. Okay. We're now up to Parak Test Mishna Bays. Parak Test Mishna Bays would really be best if we could do this with a map. The problem is that I'm having difficulty with that, and therefore we're going to learn through the Mishnah and do the best we can. We'll get the idea without being able to actually see the places on a map. Okay, so again, we have to, the discussion now of this Mishnah is going to be beer. And if you recall, and it's important to repeat, beer basically means that if, let's say, as the Bartanura points out here in this Mishnah, if, let's say, you have collected dates into your house, when it comes to a point of time when there are no more dates on the trees out in the fields, in the wild, for animals to be able to take from on their own, you may not anymore eat from those dates. You have to do beer. You have to remove them, which means that when the day comes for beer, you got to either eat them all up or you have to be mafka them. You have to render them ownerless. That is the mitzvah of beer. And now the discussion of the Mishnah is going to be that Eretz Yisrael, when it comes to the mitzvah of beer, when it comes to the time of deciding when beer has to take place, Eretz Yisrael is divided up into three areas, three zones for that. And actually, each zone has three of its own zones. What the exact ramification of that will be, that we'll see as we continue on in the Mishnayos. But the first part of the Mishnah is going to be delineating the areas of Eretz Yisrael, the three areas of Eretz Yisrael that are, each one is its own area regarding the mitzvah of beer. And then the Mishnah will talk about the three areas which in each one of the three zones. So Mishnah Beis begins. Shalosh aratzos labir. There are three lands or three areas, three zones in regard to the mitzvah of beer during Shemitah. You have Yehuda, you have Judea, the Aver Hayarden, the other side of the Jordan, the Hagalil, and the Galilee. Okay, so Yehuda is the south, the Galil is the north. The Aver HaYarden, we're going to be following Bartanura's explanation of Aver HaYarden, and that in this context of the Mishnah, the words Aver HaYarden are not used like they're used in the Chumash. And Aver HaYarden, referred to Aver HaYarden in the Chumash or many and mostly other places, are actually referring to the eastern side of the Jordan, what we call present-day Jordan. That's what Aver HaYarden is typically referred to. When we talk about the lands that Moshe conquered before the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, that is the eastern side of the Jordan River. In our Mishnah, according to the Bartanura and the Rambam, that's not what it means. Aver HaYarden, the other side of the Jordan, for whatever reason it's called that, actually means the western side of the Jordan, but it means the area in between the north and the south. The shalosh aratzos lachalachas va'achas, and each one of these three areas has three areas within it. Okay, so now we go to the first one, which is the Galil, the north. Galil ha'elyon, you have the upper Galil, the Galil ha'tachton, and the lower Galil, the ha'emek, and the valley. Those are the three areas that we have of the Galil. Now, as the Yad Avram points out, if we're talking about the upper Galilee, which is the north of Eretz Yisrael, so then basically we have the northern, western, and the upper Galilee is not so much about being north as much as being an area that's elevated, mountainous area, elevated area. And the Yad Avram points out the northern, western, and eastern frontiers of the area not be defined. If we're talking about the upper Galil, its northern border coincides with the northern border of Eretz Yisrael, which we know from other sources. The western border is the Mediterranean seaboard, and the eastern border is the Jordan. The southern border, which is the border between upper and lower Galilee, that's what our Mishnah is going to come to define. So we're now about to read the part of the Mishnah defines what's the border between the Upper Galilee and the Lower Galilee. But when we're talking about the other areas of the Upper Galilee, it's pretty much defined. Now, the Kfar Chananya Ulamalon Kol She'ena Megadol Shikman Galil HaElyai. There was a place called Kfar Chananya, which actually, according to some, the Adavar brings down is Jenin. So Kfar Chananya, Ulamalon, and above that, Kol She'ena Megadol Shikman, where the shikman, which means sycamores, don't grow. Galil HaElyai, that's the Upper Galilee. Kfar Chananya Lamatan, from Kfar Chananya and below, Kol She'megadol Shikman, which is an area that the sycamores do grow, Galil HaTachton, that is the Lower Galilee. So it would seem, as the God of Ram brings out, that to go and delineate between the Upper Galilee and the Lower Galilee, just by saying above Kfar Chananya, below Kfar Chananya, wasn't going to be that accurate because it's not necessarily a straight line. The best way of being able to really see or delineate the difference was where the sycamores grow or where the sycamores don't grow. That was the best way of helped delineate that border between the Upper Galilee and the Lower Galilee. With the Chum Tiberia, in the area of Tiberia, Ha'emek, that is the valley. Meaning you have in the Galil, you've got an Upper Galil, as the Mishnah said. Galil HaElyon, the Galil HaTachton, Va'emek. You have the Upper Galilee, the Lower Galilee, and the valley. So the Mishnah tells us above Kfar Chananya is the Upper Galilee, below Kfar Chananya is the Lower Galilee. You have this area of Emek, a valley, which is the area of the city of Tveria, which is, according to the maps that they do have here, which again, I can't fully figure out everything on this map. Tiberias is somewhere in between. Okay. Ubi Yehuda. Now when we get to the area of the southern area, which is Yehuda, which is Judea. Okay. You have Hahar, Shvela, Emek. You have a similar setup. You have a mountain, you have a lowland, and you have a village, and you have a valley, right? Which was a similar setup as before, because the Upper Galilee is a mountainous area, and then you have the Lower Galilee, which is more flatland. Then you have the valley in between. Then you had a valley. Here too, you have a similar setup. You have Yehuda, you have Hahar, the mountain. What does the mountain mean? So the mountain, according to the way the Yad Avram explains, is the mountain here was referred to as Har HaMelech. There was a mountain known as Har HaMelech, King's Mountain. That is the mountain area of Yehuda, of Judea. And they say it's somewhere north of Yerushalayim. Then you have Shvelo, you have the lowland, and you have the Emek, and then you have the valley. So the lowland, the Yad Avram points out, probably the term lowlands of the south refers to the low hilly area south of Hebron, which can be called lowland in comparison to the mountains of Yerushalayim. The flatland stretching to the west until the sea. So that's the low hilly area in the flatland south of Hebron, stretching west to the sea. That is the lowland. And then you have the valley. What's the valley? The area from Ein Gedi northward to Jericho, alongside the Dead Sea. This is the third of the regions making up Judea. So they help us a little bit in defining some of the of these areas based on contemporary places that we know of, or of places that we know of based on either ancient maps, based on ancient maps. Okay, so now we've gone through the three areas of Yehuda. Now we've got to go through the three areas of what's called Ever HaYarden. And again, according to the Baratanura, Ever HaYarden, the other side of the Jordan here, does not mean the east side, what we call now at present-day Jordan. It means an area west of the Jordan, in between the north and the south. Okay, and here the Mishnah does not frame it the same way as before, but kind of giving us a heads up. You have this, this, and this, and then telling us where it goes. It brings out differently, but here too you have a similar areas. You're going to have a mountain area, lowland area, and a valley. But here the way the Mishnah is like this: Ushvelas Lud, Kishvelas Hadarom. The lowland of Lud, that's an area, and that's part of it's 1/3 of that's one of the 3 areas of Eber HaYarden, the lowland of Lud. Kishvelas Hadarim, it's like the lowland of the south. The south is another way of referring to Yehuda, and that would be referring to the lowland of Yehuda is the Gadol HaTachta, the lower Galilee. And the Mishnah now tells us the words are the lowland of Lud. The lowland of Lud is like the lowland of the south. Let me just read a little further. V'har Shalah, and its mountain. There was a mountain there. There was a mountainous area of Eber HaYarden. Okay. And they again, the Adarama calls that the lowlands of Lud. I'm sorry, the mountainous area within the lowlands of Lud. That's the mountain, V'har Shalah, and its mountain. Kahar Melech is like the Har Melech, like the King's Mountain. Now, these 2 areas, right, that we referred to, it says the lowland of Lud is like the lowland of the south. The lowland of the south, as we said, the Judea. V'har Shalah, and its mountain, it means the mountain of Eber HaYarden, is like Har HaMelech was with the mountain of Judea. What does the Mishnah mean when it says the lowland of Lud, which is again the lowland of Eber HaYarden, is like the lowland of the south? So what it means is that if you want to determine in the lowland of Lud, if you have to do beer on something, and I should have mentioned before, beer is not uniform on all things. Different things become not available in the wild at different times. That's not just one uniform time. You have to actually go by each species. Now, but again, if you're dealing with a certain species within a certain area, if you want to know if you have to do beer in the lowlands of Lud, you look at the lowlands of the south. If something is not available in the lowlands of the south, you have to now do beer in the lowland of Lud. You now know that the thing is not available in the lowland of Lud. Why they had to determine it that way or identify it that way, I'm not sure, but that's what the Mishnah is saying. One way of saying it is that if you one practical difference is that if you would be in the lowland of Lud and you'd see no more dates, but there's still dates in the lowland of the south of Judea, you don't have to do beer yet. Your time of beer, if you're in the lowlands of Lud, which are the lowlands of Eber HaYarden, you will know that beer starts for you once beer starts on this specific thing in the lowlands of Judea. If there are no more dates, let's say in the lowlands of Judea, so now you in the lowlands of Eber HaYarden, you now have to perform beer on whatever dates you have in your house. So even though at a certain point of time it could have been that you didn't have to do beer because you were following, even though you didn't have it because you're following the lowlands of Judea, nonetheless, once in the lowlands of Judea it's not there, then you have to do beer if you're in the lowlands of Eber HaYarden. Now, when you get to the mountainous area of V'har Shalah, and when you get to the mountainous area of the lowlands of Lud, which is again the second zone of Eber HaYarden, you do beer following Har HaMelech, following the mountain of Judea, the mountainous area of Judea. Once something will no more be available, if something is still available in the mountainous area of Judea, you don't have to do beer in the mountainous area of Lud, which is Eber HaYarden. But once you have to do beer, once something is not available anymore in the mountainous area of Judea, now you're going to have to do beer in the mountainous area of Lud, of Eber HaYarden. So it's interesting that it comes out, almost sounds like, that you've got 2 areas of Judea and 2 areas of the south that are basically exactly the same time. But Yad Avram points out it doesn't have to be that way. All the Mishnah is saying is that in Eber HaYarden, these 2 areas follow these 2 areas in Judea. But the 2 areas in Judea maybe are going to follow the 3rd area of Judea, because that's going to be the halacha. If in one of the 3 zones you have something still available, let's say in the 3rd zone of Judea, you have something available, the dates are still available there, then you don't have to do beer in the other 2 areas of Judea. But once the dates are available in Judea, in the mountains area of Judea and the lowlands of Judea, now you're going to have to do beer in the lowlands of Eber HaYarden, in the mountainous area of Eber HaYarden, which is the Lud area. So the Mishnah is just saying that those two areas of Lud, those two areas of Ever HaYarden, are going to follow these two areas. Have to follow these two areas of Judea, in the sense that if they're no more available in these two areas of Judea, you got to do beer in these two areas of the Ever HaYarden. But in Judea itself, in those two areas, you may not have to actually be obligated to do beer because you've got the third area of Judea that is still available in. So the two things go to, so it comes out the Ever HaYarden is following Judea in certain in regard to its obligation for beer, but those areas of Judea that are determining beer in the Ever HaYarden are not necessarily going to have an obligation of beer themselves. They're just determining what's going on in the areas of Ever HaYarden. And then the third area of Ever HaYarden, Beis Chayron Vad Hayam, from a place called Beis Chayron until the sea, the Medina Achaz is all considered one area, and therefore, as long as in one part of that area, the dates, for example, are still available, even if the other areas are not available, there is no obligation of beer in that area, as long as somewhere within that area the dates or the fruit is the produce is going to be available. Okay. This will be continuing to the next Mishnah to give us more understanding of what's going on here. Okay. Now we're going to say for mitzvahs. Mitzvahs lo yisaseh shelo hasis shum adam Yisrael avodah avodah zara. Prohibition against enticing any Jew, to go worship idols. Shnamar, as it says, ki yisischa leimor nelch v'navda v'gomer v'chol Yisrael yishmu b'yiram l'sifel asayis kadavar hazeh. The pasuk talks about if a person tries to entice another person and says, "Let's go and worship the gods of other nations," that person is to be killed, and all of Israel shall hear and shall fear and not ever do such an evil thing again. But now, we already had before a prohibition that was called Mediach. That's talking about where you convince actually a city to worship idols. This is talking about you are going to convince an individual. Trying to entice an individual to idol worship or a city. One tries to entice an individual Jew to worship idols, whether he used a plural language or a singular language, for enticing the person, that person gets stoning, even though no one at the end even did any worshiping. The enticer didn't worship. The one he tried to entice wasn't enticed, didn't give in. None of them actually worshipped idols. Still, the person, the masis, the enticer, is going to be chayiv skila, stoning, to be liable to be put to death by stoning, because he tried to direct them to worship idols. This is different than the person who dealt with the city. A person who persuades a city will only be punished if the city actually worships idols. In this case, even if you're dealing with an individual, that's the difference whether you're addressing a city or an individual. If you're wondering how about not individual, 20 people of part of a city, I don't know exactly. I don't know what the halacha there is. But if something falls under the category of an individual, then we say for just trying to entice the person is going to be chayiv skila. And when you deal with this enticer, typically, if you want to perform a capital punishment on a sinner, you have to warn him before he commits the sin. By mace doesn't work that way. Even without warning, if he enticed, and of course there are witnesses that he did so, he will be given the punishment of skila, of stoning. This applies at all times, at all places, both by men and by women. Have a wonderful day.